5 minutes. Read the text and find out if there's anything you want to clarify. The volume you read or the text you read, see that what has been taught is understood. Give it just 5 minutes. Go through, tell me if there's anything that you want to clarify. Any part, any word, any sentence, any concept not understood.
Mom, why is the food acidic in nature?
Because hydrochloric acid is constantly getting produced. The wall of the stomach has got certain type of cells. One type of cell is constantly producing hydrochloric acid. So the medium of the stomach cannot be anything else apart from acidity. Any questions?
What is dark reaction?
Dark reactions means few reactions of photosynthesis which is not directly dependent on sunlight. If there is no sunlight, then also they would happen. At night also, evening also, those reactions go on. That is called dark reaction.
Dark reaction means which are not dependent on light.
That can happen any time of the day. Now also, evening also, night also, early morning also. The same. Chemosynthesis means formation of food by certain organisms in the soil water, but not by carbon dioxide water. Photosynthesis is carbon dioxide water. Chemosynthesis does not require carbon dioxide and water, but they would use substances in the soil, nitrates, sulfates, and convert it to carbohydrate. Like that. Chemosynthesis means utilizing substances, not carbon dioxide and water, but sulfates, nitrates, phosphates, whatever in the soil, not dependent on sunlight, and make some or the other form of carbohydrate food. Give one example of saprophyte. One example of saprophyte. Mushroom. What is the definition of saprophytic mode?
Dead like body.
Saprophytic mode definition is
The mode in which organisms feed on soluble nutrients of dead and decomposed.
so you should know now. What is saprophytic mode? What are chloroplasts? Boys, when are you going to start studying? What are chloroplasts? Cell organelles present where?
In the stomata, which produces
Cell organelles present in the stomata. Cell organelles present where? In the guard cells, in the plant cells they are present. In the guard cells they are present, producing chlorophyll. What is the function of chlorophyll? Function of chlorophyll? And
It gives the color.
no. Function of chlorophyll is what? It does not giving out color is not its function. What is the function of chlorophyll? Yes. You had written in your notebook. I have given you the answers also. Nothing you have started studying. Nothing. What are you waiting for? You are in the 10th standard.
It makes glucose.
Huh?
Glucose.
What glucose? What is the function of chlorophyll? I am asking you. I am going ahead.
Trap solar energy.
Trap solar energy. It can absorb the solar energy. What is the job of chlorophyll? Absorb solar energy. That is its function. Giving green color is not its function, no. Chloroplast is a cell organelle which produces chlorophyll. Which two parts of the alimentary canal does not carry out digestion? Which two parts of the alimentary canal does not carry out digestion? We have already studied that. Esophagus and I already mentioned this last class twice, thrice. You'll have to remember two parts of the alimentary canal which does not show digestion, no steps of digestion, that is esophagus. No mouth shows digestion, mouth carries out digestion. Esophagus and what was the function of esophagus? What is the function of esophagus? We had written, sit straight. What is the function of esophagus? What is the function of stomach? Did we write digestion? What is the function of large intestine? What is the function of large intestine? And that's why I told you lecture points, all you should write. Everything in the 10th standard cannot be given in the form of question answers.
Formation of waste substances
And
the absorption of water.
did we write digestion? No. So large intestine is another part of the alimentary canal where no digestion takes place. Esophagus is one more where no digestion takes place. Define villi. How will you define?
Small fingers present in the inner surface of the small
Inner wall of
ileum.
inner wall of the ileum
Of the small
small intestine. What is the length of the small intestine?
7 meters.
7 meters. Right?
Ma'am, in the school, the teacher taught that it's 30 feet long.
30 feet approximately. 30 feet. Correct. In feet, she is mentioning 5 feet approximately. 1 meter. And I'm talking in meters because the entire alimentary canal is 9 meters. And the longest part of the alimentary canal is the small intestine. So, what is the juice secreted? What is the digestive juice of the stomach known as?
Gastric juice.
Composition is what? What is it made up of?
Hydrochloric acid.
And
Enzymes.
Mucus.
what is the name of the enzyme? Pepsin and mucus. Composition of gastric juices, hydrochloric acid, pepsin and mucus. Why is the stomach acidic in medium?
Because of the
hydrochloric acid. Two
compound.
functions of hydrochloric acid I already asked you to write. So the
Activating the
that's
carcinogen, maintain an acidic pH.
yes, you often get this question. So this is a very nicely know points to write. The two, which is the largest digestive gland of the body? Largest gland of the body is which one? The liver. What does it produce? Digestive juice? Bile juice. Bile juice. What is its composition we wrote? Made up of bile pigments and water. Bile pigments and water. Yes. So now you'll have to remember all these. Then now when I talk about the process of digestion, it will be easier for you to understand. Process of digestion that we are going to learn in three major parts of the alimentary canal. One is mouth, the second is the stomach. Which are the parts of the alimentary canal where digestion takes place? One is mouth, one is stomach, and the other would be the small intestine. And small intestine divided into three parts. The last day I already told you. The duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. So majorly in the small intestine, the process of digestion takes place. So I start with the small intestine also here. So many other steps we are going to continue there. So let me start understanding what are the steps of digestion. The first one, let me talk about the mouth. As you write down the steps of digestion, I will summarize the process of digestion in 9 steps, talking about 3 major types of nutrients. Which are the 3 major types of nutrients which require digestion? 3 major types of nutrients which require digestion: proteins, carbohydrates, fats. But what are the other type of nutrients we consume? Vitamins and minerals. Do we talk about the digestion of vitamins and minerals? No. Why? Because vitamins and minerals are so simple, already in their simplest form, which can directly enter into our blood. Our body has no enzymes to further break them down in whatever form we consume from the fruits and the vegetables and minerals in the water or any other type of drinks. The minerals and the vitamins can directly enter into the blood right from our mouth. They need not go through further breakdown processes. So we never talk about digestive processes of vitamins and minerals. But yes, they are also broken down to some simpler forms, but that is not a part of digestion. In the liver, they are getting broken down. That is different. But now that we are talking about the process of digestion, what are we understanding? Digestion only for the carbohydrates, only for the proteins and the fats. So let us start with the mouth. The food that we consume, now that the food that we consume, and now we start chewing the food starts getting mixed with the saliva, resulting in the formation of a mass. And what is this mass of food known as? Bolus. What is bolus? Bolus is the semi-solid mass of food which is getting formed that we swallow down. Whatever we eat, rice, roti, fruits, etc., whatever we are eating, we always crush, grind, chew, and then mix with the saliva so that it becomes easier for us to swallow. So what is this semi-solid mass of food known as? Bolus. How is it helping us in the process of swallowing? Because it mixes with the saliva. So now this bolus will straight away, by the way of the esophagus, run down into the stomach. And now that it is running down to the stomach, what happens? Its consistency is now becoming a little bit more fluid in nature, because as it has run down to the stomach, as it has come in the stomach, it is mixing with the gastric juice, which has got water. So this semi-solid mass is becoming a little bit more watery. So now we are talking about blueberry. So now that we are talking about the bolus is now semi-solid. No, it is a little bit more fluid. So I would say the bolus is no more semi-solid, it is semi-fluid. And what is it now known as? Chyme. This chyme, yes, the process of digestion is happening. So many digestive enzymes, the gastric juices, and etc. coming in contact. Now that the chyme runs down to the small intestine, the first part of the small intestine, that is the duodenum. So now the juices from the liver, the juices from the pancreas coming in, getting mixed with the chyme. The consistency of the chyme is becoming even more fluid. It is almost now liquid. Process of digestion happening, still continuing. So this liquid form of the undigested food, that is known as the chyme. So what are these terms I am talking about? It is that same partially digested food running from one part, getting transported from one part of the alimentary canal to the other, but the consistency constantly getting changed. Constantly it is becoming fluid and fluid and fluid in nature, because as and when it moves to different parts, the gastric juice, the pancreatic juice, the bile juice, one after the other getting poured on it. And the watery consistency is becoming more now, but digestion is still going on. So now, the steps of digestion. We start with the mouth. What is that step of digestion in the mouth? The starch getting broken down. The starch getting broken down with the help of enzyme. Which enzyme? Which is that enzyme in the saliva? Salivary amylase. Which is that enzyme in the saliva? The salivary amylase. Starches are broken down by the salivary amylase to maltase. Starches are broken down by the salivary amylase to maltase. What is the difference between starch and maltase? Starch is very complex. Maltase is comparatively simpler. I would say if it is starch, can you give me one or two examples of starch? Can you give me one or two examples of starch? Where is starch present? Potato, corn, rice, roti, all these wheat flour items that we consume, all has got starch. So did you ever realize that the moment, if not, please do it, that whenever you eat the rice or the roti, it has actually no taste. The plain rice, the plain roti, whenever you put in your mouth, it has got actually no taste. But the moment you have started chewing, in another 1 or 2 minutes, you get to feel some sweet taste. Don't mix anything with the rice or the roti. I say rice or roti kha ke dekho. What will you understand is, the moment I have put it in the mouth, it has no taste. Absolutely yes, because starch is not sweet. Starch has no taste. It is not sweet. But the moment we put the roti in our mouth, and in 1 or 2 minutes, mixing with the saliva, the digestion immediately starts. What? Starch getting broken down to maltose. And the starch has got broken down. So I'm saying starch means glucose units bonded. How many glucose units? In hundreds and hundreds. So this long chain, complex chain, getting broken down by this enzyme to some simpler form. So maybe the simpler form is something like this. So the starch has got broken down to some units like this. Are you understanding? So it's a long chain which is broken down into 2, 3, 4 shorter fragments. That shorter fragment is what we are talking about as maltase. I'm sorry, maltose. So now correct this, maltose. It is maltose. So now that we are talking about that, what is the difference between starch and maltose? Maltose is comparatively simpler. Maltose is a big, starch is a big molecule, broken down. Poles have to be switched off so many times to or silent. Starch is a big complex molecule. The bonds will be broken by salivary amylase, converting that big complex molecule into smaller, simpler forms, maltose. Is there any other process of digestion happening in the mouth? No, no other step. Why? Why only we are talking about salivary amylase, and why only we are talking about this one step of digestion in the mouth? Why not protein? We are eating any type of a protein food, say suppose the egg and the nuts and the beans and the dairy products. Does the process of protein digestion start from the mouth? No. Why no? Can you tell me why no?
They are more complex.
Right? What is the composition of the saliva? How many enzymes does it have?
It does not digest the food completely.
What is the composition of the saliva we had studied the other day? How many enzymes does the saliva contain? How many enzymes does the saliva contain? Only one. Does it have any other enzyme, saliva? Saliva has how many enzymes? One. Saliva composition, did you write the other day? I had written down all these things on the board. Did you write what is the composition of saliva? Saliva का composition क्या है? It is made up of water,
Mucus and carbon.
what is it, read out?
Water, mucus, salivary gland, that is carbohydrates.
Saliva is made up of what? You have written wrong things in the notebook. What is the composition of the saliva? Did we do the digestive glands the other day? Saliva, salivary glands, did I write? Parotid and submandibular and sublingual, what are they producing? What are they producing? From now on, lecture notes, everything, all of you will write. Some of you are just sitting down. And now that I'm asking, you are lost absolutely. There is no point teaching this point, teaching this topic. I tell you, you will understand nothing what I'm speaking. Later you will feel, what is she talking? We are not understanding anything. Definitely you will not understand because the previous parts are not clear. What is the composition of saliva? That's why 5 minutes revision also I took.
Water and mucus.
Water, mucus and what is the next part? Salivary amylase. What is the composition of saliva? That you should know. Now that I asked you a question, and you will get this type of question in the paper. Why in the mouth only carbohydrate is getting digested? Why not protein? Because the saliva does not have any other enzyme. The saliva has got just one enzyme. What is that enzyme? Salivary amylase. That's the reason only carbohydrate can break down. There is no question of protein breakdown. Fat protein क्यों breakdown नहीं हो रहा है? Because enzyme ही नहीं है. Saliva has got no other enzyme. So remember, again I repeat, note down. What is the composition of saliva? The composition of saliva is water, mucus, salivary amylase. Only this. So what is the reason that in the mouth only one step of digestion we are talking about? Because salivary amylase does not contain enzymes for protein and fat digestion. You leave almost two pages, no? 2 pages or 1.5 page I think definitely. बीच में I will keep on giving you questions वो उसके बाद लिखना वो 1.5 page के बाद लिखो. This 9 steps of digestion all should be written together. इसके बीच में questions नहीं लिखना है. So start with this and now leave 1.5 page छोड़ो and then write down the first question. Write down the first question. Give reason. Give reason. Give reason. Only carbohydrate digestion takes place. Only carbohydrate digestion takes place in the mouth. Only carbohydrate digestion takes place in the mouth. Are you following what I'm saying? Will you be able to answer now?
Mom, can you
Give reason. Only carbohydrate digestion takes place in the mouth. Okay, wrote. Give reason. Only carbohydrate digestion takes place in the mouth. What did I tell you just now? What is the answer? Why only carbohydrate digestion takes place in the mouth? Because the mouth produces saliva, or the salivary glands in the mouth produces saliva which has only one enzyme. That is right. The salivary glands in the mouth, produces saliva. Salivary glands in the mouth produces saliva which contains only one enzyme. That is salivary amylase. Bracket में लिख के रखो tyline. Bracket में tyline. Salivary amylase is also known as tyline. The salivary glands of the mouth produces saliva which contains only one enzyme. that is salivary amylase, bracket tylene, which breaks down only carbohydrates, that is, which breaks down only carbohydrates, that is, starch to maltose. Breaks down carbohydrates, that is, starch to maltose. Okay? Now we move on to the stomach. Starch to maltose. Starch to maltose. Now we move on to the stomach. What is the medium in the stomach? The medium in the stomach is acidic. Why is the stomach acidic? I already asked you this question because of the presence of hydrochloric acid at all times. अब बोलो क्या confusion है? Confusion है?
नहीं, but after the questions it should be.
नहीं, अभी जो क्वेश्चन मैंने दिया ना, फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन, अब जब जब मैं क्वेश्चन देती रहूंगी कंटिन्यूअसली लिखो, और वो जो 1.5 पेज मैंने छोड़ने के लिए बोला उसमें अभी ये कंटिन्यूअस लिख देगा। आया समझ में? कोई मिक्स नहीं करेगा। फर्स्ट स्टेप जैसे मैंने लिखा है, उसके बाद नाउ स्टार्ट, ये पूरा एक साथ आना चाहिए, सो दैट वेरी क्लियरली you should be able to understand the 9 steps of digestion. Now stomach, now we move on. Why? No more digestion in the mouth, just now we studied. क्योंकि mouth में only the salivary amylase is there, which helps in carbohydrate digestion, so protein and fat digestion हो नहीं सकता है. Now the food is in the stomach. What is the food in the stomach now known as chyme? Chyme. Chyme is acidic or alkaline in nature? Acidic, because of the presence of hydrochloric acid. So what is the step of digestion in the stomach now? The step of digestion in the stomach, सबसे पहले what? The inactive form of the enzyme. What is the inactive form of the enzyme? Pepsinogen. Pepsinogen in the presence of hydrochloric acid will get converted to pepsin. And then now the complex proteins which are there in our food will be acted upon by pepsin. Breaking it down to partially digested forms of the protein, मतलब simpler forms of the protein. What are those forms known as? Proteoses and peptides. Peptides. Generally peptides लिखा जाता है different types, same like that. When I talk about what are these proteoses, peptides, these are simpler forms of proteins. Same like starch and maltose, I said, if I understand this protein which consists of 800 units, protein किससे बनता है? Did you ever come across? What are the repeating units of proteins known as? Amino acids, right? So amino acids, if I understand that there are in this protein present in the egg 800 amino acids hai, so I may say that this is broken down to some 400 or some 500 units, and here again broken down to some 300 units, 200 units. So it is something like this. You have to understand एक बड़ा सा chain broken down to some 3-4 छोटे-छोटे fragments. Okay. So now that I talk about that, what is the concept of digestion that we are talking about? Big complex molecule breaking down to some smaller bits, but अभी भी digestion बाकी है. Partially digested proteins. Proteins getting broken down to number them. Proteins getting broken down to proteoses, peptides. Which enzyme? Pepsin. So protein digestion requires what type of a medium? Alkaline or acidic? Acidic, always. Any other step of digestion in the stomach? What type of food gets digested in the stomach? Only proteins. Why does carbohydrate digestion does not take place? नहीं, that is go answer नहीं है. Because what is the juice in the stomach known as? Hydrochloric acid. What is the juice in the stomach? Gastric juice. और gastric juice के enzymes कितने हैं? इसीलिए कुछ भी पढ़ाई नहीं किया. Gastric juice के enzymes, हाँ? नहीं. Enzyme कौन सा है? Only one. एक ही gastric juice में भी एक ही enzyme है which acts on protein. So carbohydrate and fat digestion का कोई सवाल आता है? Nothing. Every enzyme is just like Rocken की मैंने पिछली बार बोला था. I gave you the definition of enzymes. What are enzymes? Enzymes are chemical substances which can break down complex molecule to simpler forms. और एक enzyme एक ही substrate पे काम करेगा. It is not that This pepsin can act on proteins also, carbohydrate also, fats also. Nahi. One particular enzyme, one particular substrate. Substrate matlab, isko bolenge substrate, this is enzyme, this is product. Okay. So now for one particular enzyme in the stomach, which is the enzyme, pepsin? Or koi hai? No, only one. So this enzyme will only act on proteins, not on carbohydrates, not on fats. So why in the stomach fat digestion does not take place? What is your answer? Because gastric juice does not contain any fat digesting enzyme. And also the process of fat digestion does not occur in a acidic medium. उसके लिए alkaline medium की जरूरत होती है. Clear till here? Now we move on to the third step. What is the third step? The small.
That is L or T.
Which one? M-A-L-T.
No, that B-O-L.
Bolus. Now we move on to the small intestine. Now that I talk about the small intestine, what now next? In the small intestine, you remember the entire location of those parts? The other day I showed you all those images. Now that I talk about the small intestine, the food is moving down to the small intestine. The first part of the small intestine. Now in the first part of the small intestine, what is happening? The duodenum. The duodenum. What are
made
the food is made alkaline. So I would say now in the duodenum, the food is made alkaline. Yes, the food is alkaline in the duodenum. The small intestine, the first part of the small intestine, the food is made alkaline. How? The food is made alkaline because on one side of the duodenum, what is the gland? Liver, and the other side pancreas. So pancreas and liver both are producing their juices and releasing it into the duodenum. So this acidic food is running down to the stomach and now it is becoming alkaline. First of all, we'll think of the bile juice, the one coming from the liver. What is its job? Bile juice has got the bile salts as a component, and that bile salts helps in fat digestion. So carbohydrate we spoke, protein we spoke, now we talk about fats. Fat digestion, where does it start? In the small intestine. With the help of what? With the help of bile salts. And gets broken down to what? Smaller fat globules. Smaller fat globules. Globules matlab what? A smaller chunks. A big chunk of fat broken down to small chunks. When you eat the oil and the butter and the cheese, the big chunk of the fat gets broken down with the help of bile salts. Bile salts released from where? Liver. It is a component of bile juice. So liver se produce hota hai. What is this process known as? This process is known as emulsification of fat. This process is known as emulsification of fats. So what is the meaning of emulsification of fat? This itself you get as a 2-mark question. Breakdown of complex fats to smaller fat globules with the help of bile salts. This process takes place in the duodenum. We'll write one question here, write fast. Explain the process of emulsification of fats. Explain the process of emulsification of fats. 2-mark question always in your paper. Explain the process of emulsification of fats. Check spelling EMULSIFICATION. Explain the process of emulsification of fats. Write out. The breakdown of complex fats. Breakdown of complex fats.
This is the answer.
Answer. Breakdown of complex fats to smaller fat globules. Breakdown of complex fats to smaller fat globules with the help of bile salts. With the help of bile salts is known as emulsification. Is known as emulsification of fats. Is known as emulsification of fats. Full stop. This process takes place. This process takes place in the small intestine. This process takes place in the small intestine. Within bracket you write duodenum, in the duodenum of the small intestine. And requires an alkaline medium. And requires an alkaline medium. Full stop. One more question you get is, how is the food made alkaline? Now this is a text question, the answer is there in the volume also given. But again, if I have to discuss, how is the food made alkaline in the duodenum? How is the food made alkaline in the small intestine? The food which is coming from the stomach is acidic. How is the food made alkaline? You will have to write about the pancreatic juice entering into the duodenum. You will have to write about the bile juice entering into the duodenum. And then the food, the pH differs, the pH changes. So did we talk about one step of starch or one step of carbohydrate, one protein, one fat digestion? So we will again continue with small intestine, digestion in the small intestine. We still continue the process of digestion in the small intestine. Now, as we are talking about the process of digestion in the small intestine, I am sure that this particular process is taking place in the duodenum. Digestion is still continuing in the duodenum, now with the help of pancreatic juice. This is a step which is being carried out by the bile juice. Bile juice has no other enzyme. Does the bile juice have any enzyme? What is the composition of bile juice? Water, bile salts, bile pigment. उसमें कोई enzyme है ही नहीं. So bile salts help in fat breakdown. Now, pancreatic juice will carry out the further process of digestion. But now, see, the fourth step that I'm going to write would be again the same. The fourth step that I'm going to write would be again the same. What is it? I'm writing that the starch getting broken down by pancreatic amylase. Starch getting broken down by pancreatic amylase and again to maltose. Is it not the same for salivary amylase what we wrote? Yes or no? Can you tell me why am I writing the
Because in pancreas, all three types of
enzymes are there?
Salivary amylase, trypsin.
Name. Pancreas produces three types of enzymes: pancreatic amylase, trypsin, and
the amylase.
lipase. But now, why am I repeating this step? Starch to maltose again. Now that the food has come down to the small intestine, फिर से यही step क्यों लिखना है? Because now that the food has come down to the small intestine, still some amount of starch remains undigested. क्यों? Because हमारे जो food है, every particular meal we consume starch more. Carbohydrate content हमारे food में हमेशा ज़्यादा रहता है. If you analyze every particular meal, the amount of proteins, amount of fats से amount of carbohydrates हमेशा ज़्यादा रहता है. So that's the reason when the food is running down to the small intestine, there are still adequate amount of carbohydrate left, which has to be broken down. And that now अब small intestine में तो salivary amylase है नहीं. Then how will the starch get broken down? Pancreatic amylase does the same job. Pancreatic amylase will do the same job there. Next, what to write? Now we are going to again continue. That what are the steps of digestion further? So this is partially digested proteins. This further again has to get broken down by the help of pancreatic enzymes now. So I will take this now, the proteoses and the peptones. The proteoses and the peptides. So this big chain peptides and proteoses will be broken down by a protein digesting enzyme in the pancreas. Which one? Trypsin. You have to remember these names. The trypsin here.
Proteoses means the digested
Partially digested proteins जो stomach में था. Now it is coming down intestine और further digest होना है. So this partially digested proteins, trypsin, and it will get converted to smaller peptides. और simple हो गया. But फिर भी simple और simple होना बाकी है. I talk about the sixth step. Sixth step, I have to talk about fats now. This partially digested fats further break down what? In the intestine. So I'll take smaller fat globules. Smaller fat globules. Now, smaller fat globules has to be broken down by the pancreatic enzyme, but the fat digesting one, which is a pancreatic lipase. Pancreatic lipase. So pancreatic lipase will break it down to simple fat molecules, and glycerol. Simple fat molecules and glycerol. So we can write some fatty acids now can happen, some glycerol molecules are there. Process of digestion is even further. So did we talk about the further digestion of this? Yes. Did we talk about the further digestion of this? Yes. And now the food is running down. Where is this process happening? I would say all these steps are happening where? In the duodenum.
What is lipase?
Lipase are category of enzymes. Lipases that we write any day. Fat digesting enzymes. Intestinal lipase, fat digesting. Pancreatic lipase, fat digesting. So now the food is running down from the duodenum to the jejunum. And the process of digestion continues. Further and further break down simpler and simpler forms. So we are just talking about few steps, not all. Now can you tell me the 7th step that I have to write? What should I take? Now again I'll have to take this, how further it is getting broken down. Then the next step I'll have to take this, how further. Then I'll have to take this, how further, like this. So let me take maltose now, how further they are getting digested by the intestinal enzymes. Now the food is in the jejunum. The maltose will be further broken down by maltase. Where is maltose present? In what type of food is maltose present? It is also a type of carbohydrate. It is not starch. It is starch se simple hai. Maltose is present in all the malt containing foods. For example, the barley, the different health drinks that you consume, the Horlicks and the Complan and all these, the malt containing foods. Malt is also a type of a food item. So that contains maltose, sugar, the natural sugar that it has. And this will get broken down to glucose plus glucose. Why do I write glucose twice? Because it is something like this. 2 molecules bonded and maltose will break it down to single units like this. So ये single units क्या है? Glucose. Further breakdown हो सकता है? No, it is already now simplest. Can go to the blood. It is something like this. But same like maltose, we are writing only maltose, but intestine में maltose की तरह और भी some simple carbohydrates रहता है which needs further digestion. So which are the other type of sugar? I said the type of sugar which is present in the malt containing foods. The barley hai, then the Horlicks hai, the Bonvita hai, and all those the health drinks that we generally consume. What else? Where else we come across sugar present? Is sugar there in the milk that we consume? Yes, natural sugar. So what is that milk sugar known as? Lactose. Lactose. So that lactose also has to get broken down. Lactose will get broken down with the help of what enzyme? Lactase. And this will get broken down to what? Glucose and galactose, which is the simplest form of carbohydrate digestion. Glucose and galactose, simplest form of carbohydrate digestion. Does the fruit contain sugar that we eat? Yes. What is the fruit sugar known as? Sucrose. Sucrose. So that also has to get broken down. So I would write sucrose now getting broken down with the help of sucrase and getting converted to simplest form, that is glucose and fructose. So now that I say the glucose and fructose, yes, this is the simplest form of carbohydrate digestion. इससे आगे intestine में digestion नहीं हो सकता है. The glucose and the fructose will not be broken down by any further enzyme in the intestine. Digestion is over for carbohydrates. So it is in this form that the glucose and the fructose and the galactose can enter the blood. This is the simplest form of carbohydrate digestion. But when questions there in your paper, name the simplest form of carbohydrate digestion. Are you supposed to write galactose? Are you supposed to write fructose? No, glucose ही लिखना है क्यों? Because they will again get converted into glucose. The galactose and the fructose and glucose का chemical formula same है. If I talk about this C6H12O6, इसका भी formula है C6H12O6 and इसका भी formula है C6H12O6. Only the orientation different. Otherwise, they are the same. Chemical formula is same.
Now there are also fermented drinks, so where is that?
Fermented drinks also, when we are talking about that, also will contain sucrose or maltose. That also will contain maltose or sucrose. So ultimately they are again getting converted into glucose. Ultimately or the other, they are always getting converted into glucose. Galactose, वो भी glucose में later convert हो जाता है. Lactose, everything, all these types of other forms of glucose that I am talking about, that will again get converted into glucose. So when we write, what is the simplest form of carbohydrate digestion? We don't write fructose, we don't write galactose, we always write glucose क्योंकि ultimately सारे इसी form में convert हो जाता है in our body and then go to the blood. Then this is about the 7th step. What about the 8th step? Let me write. What about the 8th step? Which one I have to write down? Now peptides. I have to continue with peptides. These peptides will have to get further broken down with the help of the intestinal enzymes. What do we write? This is known as the intestinal peptidase. Intestinal peptidase. To what? Amino acids. So now I get amino acids. Amino acids, these are the simplest form of protein digestion. Glucose, simplest form of carbohydrate digestion. We are left with just one last step, the 9th step. That is fat digestion. Here we have written down this. This further has to get broken down. And then we are done with the process of digestion. I will write here. What is that? Simple fat molecules. The simple fat molecules will have to be broken down by what enzyme? Now intestinal lipase. What type of enzymes are fat digesting ones? Lipases. So I write intestinal lipase. Breaking them down to what now? Breaking them down to fatty acids and glycerol. That is the simplest form of fat digestion. Fatty acids and glycerol. Simplest form of fat digestion. So in 9 steps, we summarize the process of digestion. Basically, in our body, there are many other steps happening. So we did not talk about that right now. Basic 9 steps. What are those? Okay. All of you will write down this. All of you complete with this, then only when I ask you certain other questions, you will be able to answer. So now see, after you finish writing down these 9 steps, can you tell me which are the steps for protein digestion? Bolo, which are the steps of protein digestion? Number 2. Number 5. Number 5 and number 8. अभी आया समझ में how to write answers? In your paper, in your exam, you will get explain the process of protein digestion. So you will have to write, pick up these steps and then write. And if it is carbohydrate digestion, then which steps? 1, 4, then 4 and 7. Clear है? We will write one question so that you understand in what format to answer. Complete karo fast. All these 9 steps complete karo.
If we can the chemical composition of glucose and fructose is same.
Glucose, fructose, galactose, chemical formula same रहता है. Only the arrangement of hydrogen, oxygen different है. So all of these can directly enter into the blood. So that's the reason, since glucose is most commonly present. concentration अगर देखा जाए ग्लूकोज का concentration हमेशा ज़्यादा रहता है. So that's the reason whenever we answer questions, we always write simplest form of carbohydrate digestion is glucose. वैसे तो in our body galactose भी है, fructose भी है. But since that is not the most privileged form, answer glucose ही लिखा जाता है. Okay, let us try answering one question so you understand in what format to write. Explain the process of protein digestion in the human digestive system. Protein digestion. In your exam, इस तरह के ही questions आएंगे, या तो protein या तो carbohydrate, not all together. Explain the process of protein digestion in the human alimentary canal. 2 minutes, we'll just write fast so that you understand the format. Explain the process of protein digestion in the human alimentary canal. Let us write. The process of protein digestion starts in the protein digestion stomach. Process of protein digestion starts in the stomach with the help of pepsinogen. With the help of pepsinogen, which is activated to pepsin, in the presence of HCl. In the presence of HCl. अभी एक लाइन छोड़ो. This reaction pepsinogen to pepsin you will have to write here. ये बाद में घर में जाके फिल करना. अभी एक लाइन छोड़ो. Go to the next line. 2 लाइन छोड़ के now continue. Pepsin acts on equations अभी खुद से पिक करके लिखना बाद में. Pepsin breaks down proteins. Pepsin breaks down proteins to proteoses and peptides in an peptides. देखो spelling proteoses and peptides in an acidic medium. Full stop. Equation लिखने के लिए 2 लाइन छोड़ो. अभी वो पेप्सिन वाला इक्वेशन लिखना है. नेक्स्ट लाइन 2 लाइन छोड़ के नेक्स्ट. Peptides are further digested by trypsin. Peptides are further digested by trypsin in the duodenum. Peptides are further digested by trypsin in the duodenum. अभी step 5 लिखना है. Space छोड़ो. 2 लाइन.
हाँ, पहले वाले जगह पे बताया था पेप्सिन द प्रेजेंस ऑफ HCl. आप वहाँ पे कौन सा इक्वेशन?
देखो अभी प्रोटीन्स का जब लिखोगे फर्स्ट गैप में ये इक्वेशन जाएगा, सेकंड गैप में ये इक्वेशन जाएगा, थर्ड गैप में ये जाएगा एंड फोर्थ गैप में ये जाएगा. ओके, क्लियर है? हाँ बोलो.
कहाँ पे क्या क्या करना है?
देखो फर्स्ट आई आस्क्ड यू reason. So first में this one. No? First में you are writing pepsin in the presence of hydrochloric acid. Pepsinogen to pepsin. This will come here. Next gap में in the acidic medium. Proteins to
proteoses plus peptides.
Proteins and the job of pepsin will come here. अब इसके बाद this will come. So what is the last sentence? Tell me.
Peptides are further digested
Broken with the help of trypsin. तो अभी ये trypsin वाला equation उसमें fit होगा. 2 लाइन छोड़ो and last write down. 2 लाइन छोड़ो to write down the function of trypsin that equation and last you write peptides are further broken down. Peptides are further broken down by the intestinal peptidase. Peptides are further broken down by intestinal peptidase. Peptides are further broken down to intestinal peptidase to amino acids. Peptides are further broken down by intestinal peptidase to amino acids, comma, the simplest form of protein digestion. The simplest form of protein digestion. आया समझ में सबको?
Broken down by intestinal peptidase
to amino acids, comma, the simplest form of protein digestion. तो फर्स्ट गैप में ये इक्वेशन, सेकेंड गैप में ये, थर्ड गैप में ये, एंड फोर्थ गैप में, मीनिंग एट द एंड यू राइट दिस. क्लियर है? ओके, सो एट होम आज ही ये कंप्लीट करो, अदरवाइज यू विल फॉरगेट लेटर. क्या लिखना है? कंप्लीट करना ये सारी इक्वेशन. सो दिस इज हाउ यू शुड राइट योर आंसर. This can be a 2 mark 3 mark question. जिसमें little bit of introduction, you'll have to write description कहाँ पे हो रहा है acidic medium, alkaline medium, and then supported by the equation.
Ma'am, the 8 and 9 are in the ileum, right? Are taking place in
नहीं, jejunum. This is happening in the jejunum. ये पूरा चीज jejunum में हो रहा है. ये पूरा process
in ileum what happens?
by the time all these are
Reabsorption.
हो गया, digestion is over. इलियम में जब फूड पहुंचा, by the time amino acid, glucose, fructose सब ready है.
Reabsorption.
हाँ, तब खाली absorption हो रहा है. All of you will complete this work. Okay.
simplest form
Protein digestion. Amino acids are the simplest form of protein digestion. Okay, and उसके बाद वो एक equation आएगा last वाला. Protein. Complete करो.
jejunum organ digest कर रहे हैं ना.
sorry
मतलब तुम चिकन खा रहे हो, मेरा organ digest हो गया अंदर. कौन सा?
5 मिनट